African father in America. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. African father in America. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze.
You are listening to African Father in America podcast by Simon Javan Okello, live from Seattle, Washington, USA.
Greetings everyone. Thank you for joining me today for another episode of the African Father in America podcast. My name is Simon Javan Okello and I'm really excited to be here with you all today. I'm really privileged to be with the wonderful Dr. Joye Hardiman, who is a writer, scholar, teacher, world traveler, storyteller, and the CEO of Hardiman House Incorporated, which is an urban sanctuary that hosts and convenes saloons, programs, and virtual events that expand the mind, feed the spirit, and restore the soul. She is also the creative director of the Reimagining Exploratorium, a training, coaching, and consulting agency of Ancestral Art Works, a creative production company that uses ancestral wisdoms to solve contemporary problems. She was the executive director of the Evergreen State College urban campus in Tacoma, Washington for almost 2 decades. The second national vice president of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization, ASCAC, and is now a senior member of the Pacific Northwest Pan-African Community. Beautiful people, it's really an honor, and I have to say that, Dr. Hardiman is really like a mother figure to me, father figure to me. So being in your presence, before I share with our audience more details about what we'll be discussing, I just want you to give me the permission, as we do culturally, to continue speaking.
Oh, it is my honor. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. So today we are going to cover the story of Dr. Joye Hardiman. We are going to cover, her work as a master teacher, educator, storyteller, and world traveler. We are also going to talk about what a father figure means to Dr. Joye Hardiman. And we are going to discuss how Black fathers are perceived and how we can change that narrative. And then we are going to talk about how Black fathers can support each other, considering that we are living in a time when white supremacy is eminent and Black lives are not valued globally. And finally, we'll talk about how you can stay connected with Dr. Joye Hardiman. So with that, I want to welcome, my dear, wonderful Dr. Joye Hardiman to just paint for us a picture of, like a young Dr. Hardiman, maybe when you were 8, 12. At that time, did you think that you'd be, the elder that we all revere today?
Oh, no. I did not. I had no idea. I was, when I was a young person, I was just into being a kid and liking boys and going to school and it wasn't until I was much later in my life that I kind of realized my destiny and realized my commitment. And so I let me see how to say it.
Right.
I'm trying to think about it. Okay. A writer. I'll just go through the categories. A writer. A lot of my writings have to do with ancient wisdoms and contemporary solutions. My background, my dissertation is in ancient Egyptian, ancient Kemetic literary studies. I found that our ancestors left us lessons in teachings in the writing. It happened in Kemet. They wrote it on the walls. They wrote it on papyruses. They wrote it on their tombstones. They wrote what they thought was a person, what it meant to have good character. And so when I was studying those, I found that many of those were applicable to contemporary times. And so that's kind of my life's work. I write about how we can use these images or concepts or principles. I teach about I teach studies in resiliencies and resistance to show how to go back into history so that so we can see that our ancestors have done many of the things we have done already, and we can learn from them. I do field research. I've traveled to North Africa, West Africa, South Africa, and East Africa, as well as to the Caribbean and to Cuba and Haiti and Ecuador, looking at the African contribution to world civilizations. And then I come home and tell stories about it.
Wow. So, when you think about your ancestors or your parents, who do you think inspired you to start doing this work?
I have to think my parents inspired me. My mother was a storyteller. She was a principal. My mother was a teacher. But when she was in college, she was part of the Black oratory tradition. In order to make money, young college students would go around the country reciting poetry, Negro poetry, what they called it. And she did that. So when I was a kid, everybody was reading Jack and Jill and Humpty Dumpty. And she was reading me Paul Laurence Dunbar. And she was reading me, Langston Hughes. And so I got that love from her. And my father liked to travel. He was in reconnaissance. He wanted to go places, and so he kind of and he was a lifetime member of the NAACP. He was really proud of that.
Wow.
So both of those forces kind of laid a foundation. And I grew up in a community. I grew up in a community that was composed of 13 Black couples who all came together, tore the fences down between their houses, and basically supported each other politically. Some of them were council people, some of them became the mayor, supported each other. Some of them were doctors, some of them were labor people, some of them were beauticians. They were with a whole mixture. So all of that awoken in me the beauty and the diversity of people of African descent.
My dear, it's just so wonderful to be in your presence. I wanted you to paint a picture for those people who have never been to Seattle or America, but they're the listeners of the African Father in America podcast, maybe back home or in Europe or any other part of the world. Just paint for them a picture of a place when you are young, and also currently, what it looks like where you live.
The geographics of it? I mean, like
just a picture.
A picture. Okay. All right. I grew up in Buffalo, New York. Buffalo, New York is a small town, kind of like Kisumu. New York City is Nairobi, and everybody loves Nairobi. But Buffalo was my home, and there were lots of working class people there. The street I lived on was right next to a boulevard that had elm trees on either side and crossed the city. So you could go from one end of the part of the city to the other part, walking down this grass boulevard. You'd have to cross the street, but then back on the boulevard. And I used to play out there at night when I was a kid. When I was growing up, we would play tag. And later on, when we would kind of court out there and sit and talk and that kind of stuff like that. And the neighbors were really proud of their lawns. So people really kind of took care of their lawns, but there were not a lot of fences because all the children belonged to everybody in that neighborhood. So it was like living in a compound, right? So that it was like living in a compound. Here in Tacoma, and I live in Tacoma, Washington, which is 3,000 miles away from Buffalo. Buffalo is on the Atlantic Ocean. Tacoma is on the Pacific Ocean. But because I came from such a rich community in Buffalo, I have recreated a similar community here in the Northwest. So in the Northwest, I live in a house that's like the house in Buffalo. It was built in 1910, and it has lots of wood and a sliding doors. My front lawn, when I moved in, I told someone I didn't ever want to mow the grass. So I have palm trees in my front yard.
Wow.
I have maple trees in my front yard.
Wow.
I have a little olive tree in my front yard.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
and I also have something that for your listeners, but I think it also may come from Africa. I have a bottle tree in my front yard.
Wow.
And a bottle tree is you put blue bottles on a tree or on stakes, and they catch the evil spirits so that your property is protected.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
by the ancestors. So and my house also has lots of trees.
Yeah.
And I can see Mount Rainier, which is this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful mountain. If I go to one corner of my room and look really like that, I can kind of see it. So it has So for your listeners that are from here, a lot of green, a lot of trees. I grew up with a lot of trees and a lot of green. Even though I lived in a city, I was always blessed enough to find some place.
Wow, I felt like I was just there with you from Buffalo to Tacoma.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would really love for you to share with us what a father figure means to you.
Okay. Again, I was blessed. You're just talking to a person who's been. I had the most amazing father. My father was my best friend. You know, he was when we would go on family trips, and because he had been at Tuskegee not as a fighter but as a reconnaissance person, he taught me reconnaissance. He taught me map reading. So he would drive, and I would be the navigator of the map. I would kind of go, all right, we gotta go here, go there, and I took it very, very seriously. Even if we weren't going to need the map for 3 hours, I was still on the map because he told me that was important.
Wow.
And he unconditionally, I'm sure he had lots of opinions about me, but he unconditionally loved me because I kind of had a zigzag path when I was a kid. But he never judged me. I got myself kicked out of school, college, so I could go to New York to be an artist. And he drove all the way to Iowa to help me get the stuff. He drove me to New York. We never told my mother that I got kicked out of school.
Wow.
Oh, and he made sure I was safe. Oh, the last story about him is that because my mother used to, when I was a little kid, used to tell him he had to spank me when I was not being good. You know, and so we would go down in the basement. I would sit on the freezer, and he would take a belt, and he'd hit the side of the wall, and I would scream, "Oh, oh, oh!" until my mother came down, and she caught both of us. And then after that, she just they found other ways of punishing me.
Yeah, wow. You know, this brings me to a point where I just want you to, share with me what your views are about Black fathers, because when I was in Kenya before I moved to the US, I didn't even have to identify myself as an African or anything. I was just a human being, and I didn't worry about who was around and things like that. But since I moved to the US in 2010, I've been here for almost a decade now, and I'm learning that there's a perception about Black fathers where people say that we are lazy, we are irresponsible, we are absent. And that's not true from what I'm seeing. I have friends that do everything they can, and they even get vulnerable and seek help from the community in ways that I can't do myself, So I just wanted you to share with me what you think this perception is, or where it came from, and how we can change it.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Okay, I think it's important, really, Simon, that it's really important to understand is that from the minute the Black man landed on the soil of the Americas, everything was done to reduce his image, and particularly his image as father. It was really critical for the enslavement, for the colonialization system, for the Black man to be seen as shiftless, or dangerous or etc. And that vision was propagated by the media, by early films really showed black men as really, as shuffling, or crazy. And then the music came, like, there are all these songs about mother. Oh, my mama, I love my mama. Oh, mama mia. And the songs about black men are, Papa was a Rolling Stone. So when you grow up and you hear Papa was a Rolling Stone, and when black men have been forced to watch their mothers, sisters, aunties, etc., be raped and not being able to do anything about it, and you get the notion, oh, he's shiftless, and then if black men are denied work, and denied housing, black GIs went off to war, came home, everybody, all the white guys got housing, all the white guys got GI bills, black fathers didn't get it. And on top of that, the welfare system came in, and if you had a man in your house, you couldn't get any welfare, even if he was there trying to help or do something else like that. So that forced the black man away from home, because the system said, if they found there was a black man in the home trying to take care of something other, you lose your money. So systemically, those things are in place, and the system, the political systems reinforces it, the media system, the educational system reinforces it. Black boys get more detention than anybody else. And that's because we learn differently. There's a kind of kinesthetic movement and a learning, and it's a different rhythm, but that's penalized. And so black boys are denied from their fathers, and then they grow up not wanting, with no models, et cetera, et cetera. But against all odds, and that's the most important thing to understand, against all odds, there have been many, many black fathers who have prevailed. There, even back all the way from enslavement times, there were black fathers that would sneak away in the night, make sure that their children or their woman was okay at the risk of death. We don't talk about those stories. There was many a man who just, and that was one of the first things that happened after Emancipation Proclamation. Fathers start seeking their children and start seeking their wives that have been sold away. So we got this stacked deck. But, we are a people of resiliency, and we're a people of resistancy, and we're a people who find a way out of no way. So.
Yes. Wow. So right now, there is a lot of trauma, especially amongst black men, because a lot of the brothers, if you look at George Floyd, if you look at Ahmaud Arbery, you find that the brutality involved leaves a lot of black men in fear, including myself. So I'm just curious, you are an elder and a mother and father figure. What are some ways that you think black men can support themselves right now?
I hear what you're saying, and I can understand your fear, and I have that fear as well. My friend just told me that her 10-year-old grandson, when they have been doing quarantine and they live in Maryland, and Ayana, his mom, was going to go to the store, and the little boy went and grabbed her around her legs and said to her, if you see any white supremacists, I have a strategy. Just tell them you're for Trump. Now, the fact of this little boy, 10 years old, having to sit to his head and work out a strategy, and the strategy is passed. Pretend you're white. History just repeating yourself. So it's scary out there. It is scary out there. It is scary out there. But we have to remember at some time, again, going back to history, but there have been times also when it's been scary out there. This isn't the first time the Klan ruled the world. This isn't the first time, somebody was, the police were created to capture black people. That in America, that they were the first police, their first job was to catch runaway enslaved people. That was their job. So they're just doing what they're doing, but they're doing it now. So how do we deal with that? I think, one, I always tell people, don't go alone. at the beginning, I think for Black fathers, particularly the brotherhood, is finding out a brotherhood. If you don't have a brother, you create a brother. If you know, and you don't need a whole bunch. Like 1 or 2 is enough. 3 is good. 3 is fun. But there are some big groups, and I would go big groups. But I think it's really important, particularly for Black fathers, because and in this time of COVID, nothing is the same. Nothing. There's new. You have to be constantly creating, but creating happens through dialogue. You know, and I think a lot of Black fathers are out there trying to do it by themselves or fit it by themselves. And I say, but we can create communities. That's how we survived in Africa. In South, with the Maroon Society, the men gathered together and formed brotherhoods. And they were self-help brotherhoods, and the self-help could be anything like, I'm emotionally depressed. Can I call somebody on the phone and just say, and can I have somebody reassure me that I am doing this right? And what does it mean to be a man? And all those questions, that only happens through dialogue.
Right. Thank you so much. We are coming towards the end of our conversation today, so I just want to go over everything we talked about. Then I'll give you a chance to share with the listeners and the viewers of the African Father in America podcast how they can learn more and connect with you. So to everybody that has been tuned in to the conversation that Dr. Joye Hardiman has been having with me today, we talked about her story, where she grew up. She painted for us a wonderful picture of, the neighborhood she grew up in, Buffalo, New York, and her house in Tacoma, Washington. And she also, spoke to us about her work as a master teacher, educator, storyteller, and a world traveler. We spoke about what a father figure means to her, and, how her dad drove with her and she was the navigator. And then we talked about how Black fathers are perceived, how Black fathers can support each other. And now, my dear Dr. Joye Hardiman is going to share with us how people can connect with her and stay connected with her work. But also, if there's anything I didn't say or ask that you'd like to wrap up this show with today.
Okay, well, first of all, Simon, I want to say what fun this has been.
I know.
I so enjoyed it. I really liked your questions. I really liked thinking about where I grew up and how it connected to me here. Thank you. Thank you for that little journey. How people can get in touch with me is I have a web page. I have a YouTube page. And it's called Ancestral Art Works. Right? Ancestral Art Works on YouTube. And I just completed a 14-week series called Let the Ancestors Speak.
Wow.
In which I do a virtual tour of my house because I can't go anywhere. So I'm in my house. So I figured I might as well have some fun with my house. And I talk about the different objects and the different artifacts I've collected from my world travel and what lessons they have for contemporary time. And so that's been fun. So if someone would like to like to hear more, Ancestral Art Works on YouTube.
I'll make sure I share, your YouTube channel as well. And please go ahead and share your link to your Facebook or Twitter or any other way, any other way that people can connect with you.
Okay, I'm starting to learn more about technology. I was really pleased to do YouTube. Now I'm going to learn, and this is my first podcast, so this is delightful.
Oh, this is
great. I'm doing really good as a 76-year-old woman.
You are. Your YouTube channel is so lovely, actually. It's so, it's so active. It's hard to do that. So I was so proud, and I felt, I just felt like people need to be courageous like you. There's so many young men that can't do what you're doing, and they have so much energy, So I'm just really, really lucky to have this time with you today. you know.
Thank you. I'll put in a plug, because if I say it, it'll happen.
Right.
And stay tuned, because sometime in the fall, I'm gonna come out with a book called the Resurrection of Truth from the Chains of Falsehood. And it's all about and it's being illustrated by a young artist I met in Mexico, who is from Venezuela and is a refugee, and had to leave because of political stuff, and has been wandering, and we connected. And Owar Arunga is going to do the soundtrack, where we're going to make a record to go with it. So anyway, I just want to say I want to leave with one quote. You mentioned something about my energy, and I get my energy because I consistently try to follow the dictates of Queen Hatshepsut from the 18th dynasty, who said, I take as my sacred mission to restore that which is in ruin and make it more beautiful than before.
Thank you.
To bring truth back into the world that has too long been dominated by falsehood.
Thank you. Ashe.
Ashe.
Yeah, I'm learning now. I'm a true African, because I came to the US with an African cultural background, but now I'm learning the African American cultural background and structures. And so, I feel like I'm really lucky, because while here, I've started connecting with people like Africans in Spain, Africans in Brazil.
Yes.
So it's really amazing to have this type of a platform, and the work we've been doing with One Vibe, we've done it so consistently. And as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you for, all the support you've given me and One Vibe over the years.
Oh, it has been my honor. And one little tiny last thing, I don't know how this works, but really important, Simon. Don't think of yourself as living in the Northwest. You are a man of African descent who's global. You are a global citizen. And as long as you think of yourself as globally, you are always connected. If you just think of yourself as being in America, sometimes it's a weird place.
Right.
If you think of yourself is that I'm a global person who is residing in the Pacific Northwest, who also resides in Kisumu, who also resides in London.
Right.
It'll help to raise the spirit.
Yes, that's from this moment, that's who I am now.
Okay. Right, now I'll be quiet.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you again for listening and subscribing to the African Father in America podcast on Apple Podcast and iTunes. Right now, I just want to ask you to make sure you follow me at Javan Okello on Twitter and at Simon Javan Okello on Instagram. And with that, I just want to say thank you again so much for all the support you've given the African Father in America podcast until today. With that, have a beautiful evening. Thank you so much, my dear, for coming and creating this time to connect with me and share wisdom with our people.
Thank you. And thank you for the honor of inviting me.
Of course. Have a wonderful evening.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
African Father in America. Tujikaze, jikaze. Tujikaze, jikaze. African Father in